There's a variety of different ways that you can approach solving equations. The explanations that I'm going to give in this video are slightly different than the way I would normally teach this, but I think it's a bit more intuitive. Before I get started with the actual process of solving these, I want to keep a few things in mind. I want you to keep in mind that the opposite of addition is subtraction, and the opposite of subtraction is addition. Likewise, the opposite of multiplication is division, and the opposite of division is multiplication. So these are called inverse operations, but we need to keep them in mind because anytime we're dealing with addition, we're going to be dealing with subtraction. Anytime we're dealing with multiplication, we're going to be dealing with division. So with that in mind, let's actually start our problem. So our problem is -7 plus 2x equals -19. And when you work this out on paper, I always recommend rewriting the equation off to the side. Don't change anything, just write it off to the side. Our goal is to solve for x because that's what the problem tells us. So the way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to look at either the left side of the equal sign. So here's the equal sign. I'm either going to look at the left side or I'm going to look at the right side, and I'm not going to look at the other side. So what side do I look at? It depends on where the x is. In this case, the x is over here. It's on the left side. So I'm going to completely ignore this -19 because it has nothing to do with our problem right now. Ultimately, our goal is to get this x by itself. That means that we're eventually going to remove this -7 and we're eventually going to remove this 2. One of the things that we can do to figure out our first step is to circle our x. Now I'm going to make another circle around this, but I'm going to make this circle a little bit larger. If I make this circle a little bit larger, it'll cover up this 2. Now notice that I'm not just circling 2x, but I'm circling the plus sign as well. Anytime I make my circles, if there's a symbol to the left of the number, I'm going to make sure that that symbol is within the circle that I draw. So I've drawn 2 circles. Now I'm going to draw one more so that everything on the left side of this equal sign is circled. And when I do that, I end up getting this -7 within this red circle. So to get the x by itself, what we're going to do is we're basically going to peel off these layers. We're going to start from the outside and work our way in. So if I look at what's in the outside circle, we have a -7. That means that that's the first thing that I want to get rid of, because ultimately, again, we want to have the x by itself. So we're going to take that -7 and we're going to get rid of it. Now, how do we get rid of a -7? Well, we know negatives are opposites of positives, or subtracting is the opposite of addition. So we can think of this -7 as being a -7, and we want to do the opposite of that to get rid of it. So what we end up doing is adding 7 to the left side of the equal sign. But when we solve equations, anytime we do anything to the left side of the equal sign, we need to go to the other side, and we also need to add 7 to it. So this is something consistent throughout all problems. Anytime we do something to the left side of the equal sign, we need to do it to the right side, and vice versa. So on the left side, if we go ahead and do -7 plus 7, that becomes a 0, and we can just cross them out. So they'll go away on the left side. What we're left with on the left side of the equal sign is positive 2x. Now this plus sign you don't necessarily need to write down. We can just write 2x down. So we have 2x equals whatever -19 plus 7 is. If we go ahead and do the math, -19 plus 7, they have opposite signs, so we're really subtracting them. And when we subtract them, we get the number 12. But because the 19 is the larger value and it's negative, we're going to get a -12 out of that. So -19 plus 7 gives us -12. At this point, we're almost done with the problem. Our equation is now something simple. It's 2x equals -12. It is possible to guess what value of x would make this a true statement, but let's not do that. Let's stick with the process of solving equations. So if I go back to this idea of making circles around the x, I would make a circle around the x, and then I would make another circle that's a little bit larger. Now that everything on the left side is covered in the circle, I want to work my way from the outside in. So in my outside circle, I have this 2. Now what's going on with this 2? Well, it's right next to an x, but there's no symbol between them. Anytime you have this situation happen, anytime you have any number next to an x, they're really being multiplied by each other. So even though it's not written down and you cannot see it, this is really like 2 times x. Our goal is to get rid of this 2 so that the x is by itself. If we know that that 2 is being multiplied by x, then we need to do the opposite of multiplication to get rid of that 2. The opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both the left and the right side of the equation by 2. The way that'll look is not by using a division sign, but by treating it as a fraction. So on the left side, I'm going to turn this expression into 2x divided by 2, and it'll look like a fraction. What I do to one side of the equation, I do to the other. So on the other side, I also need to divide by 2. Now I need to simplify the expression. On the left side, 2 divided by 2. They do cross out. Technically, it gives us 1x, but to avoid confusion, I'm going to just cross them out, and we're going to be left with an x. So we have x equals, and on the right-hand side, we have negative 12 divided by 2. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. So we end up getting x equals negative 6 as our answer. For this problem, we have 19 equals 4v plus 3. I'm going to approach this in the same exact manner as the other problems. I know that ultimately I want to get the v by itself, so I'm going to circle the v. Now I'm going to make this circle a little bit larger. So I'll circle this 4 along with the v. Notice that there's still a plus 3 on the right side. So I'm going to draw another circle that covers up that plus 3. And at this point, we have the entire right-hand side of this equation circled. To get the v by itself, we're going to undo each of these steps, and we're going to work our way from the outside circle to the inside. So the outer circle is a plus 3. That means we got to get rid of plus 3. What's the opposite of adding 3? Subtracting 3. So we're actually going to subtract 3 from both sides of these equations. I'm going to write a minus 3 on the right-hand side and a minus 3 on the left-hand side. On the right side, plus 3 minus 3, those cancel out. They cancel out and they leave us with a 4v. Now on the left-hand side, we got to go ahead and subtract these numbers. 19 minus 3 gives us 16. So we end up with 16 equals 4v. Now that we're done rewriting the equation, we look at what's happening to v, and v is being multiplied by 4. Since it's being multiplied by 4, we need to do the opposite of multiplying by 4 to get the v by itself. That means we are going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division, and we're dividing by 4. What I do to one side of the equal sign, I do to the other. So on the other side, I'm also dividing 16 by 4. On the right-hand side, 4 divided by 4 gives us a 1v. So we can cross out those 4s, and we don't need to write a 1 down. We can just write v. And on the left side, we have 16 divided by 4, which is 4. So we end up with 4 equals v, but if you notice, they want us to write our answer as v equals a number. All that means is that we need to flip the order in which I wrote this. So instead of writing this as 4 equals v, we would write it as v equals 4, and that would be our answer. This problem wants us to solve for u, and the equation they give us is negative 2 equals 2 plus u over 2. I'm going to approach this problem like the others. I'm going to look at the u and figure out what's happening to it. To do that, I'm going to circle the u. Then I'm going to make another slightly larger circle. If I do that, I end up circling this 2 at the bottom of this fraction. If I draw my last circle to cover up everything on the right-hand side, notice that we have this 2 off to the left. So that's the first thing I need to get rid of. I want to keep this green circle alone. That means I need to get rid of this 2. How do you get rid of a 2? Well, notice that it's not being multiplied or divided by anything. It's kind of off on its own. So if you just think of the number 2, how can you turn that 2 into a 0? Well, we can turn it into a 0 by subtracting it by 2. So even though you don't see a plus sign here, you can imagine it as being a positive 2. To get rid of a positive 2, you subtract 2, and that's what we're doing. What we do to one side of the equal sign, we do to the other. So on the other side, I'm also going to write a minus 2. On the right-hand side, 2 minus 2 those go away, they cross each other out. And that leaves us with a u over 2 on the right hand side. Now we do have a plus sign here, but anytime we have a plus sign, we don't need to write it down. So we have a u over 2 on the right, and on the left side, I need to do this math. I need to do -2 minus 2. Both of these 2's have the same sign, so we're adding the numbers together, and we're getting a 4 out of it. But we do need to get the sign of the larger value. They're both the same values, and they're both negative, so my answer is going to be negative. And just in case that's a little confusing, all I'm doing is I'm following the rules of adding and subtracting. -2 minus 2 gives me -4. So at this point, here's my u. What's happening to the u? The u is being divided by 2. Since we're trying to get the u by itself, we need to do the opposite of dividing by 2. The opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2. So I'm not going to write a multiply by 2 at the bottom because this will look really, really weird. Instead, I'm just going to write it off to the side. And I'm not going to use an X, or I'm not going to use that multiplication symbol. I'm going to use a dot to represent multiplication. So to get rid of this 2, I need to multiply by 2. So on the left-hand side of this equation, I'm also going to do that. I'm going to write it as 2 times -4. On the right-hand side, since we're dividing by 2 and then multiplying by 2, these 2's are going to cancel each other out, and that'll leave us with a u on the right-hand side. Now on the left-hand side, we still have this 2 times -4, and 2 times -4 gives me -8. So we would end up with this answer of -8 equals u, or if we flip it around, we get u equals -8, and that would be our final answer to this problem. This question gives us 2 plus x over 4 equals 22, and they want us to solve for x. So I'm going to circle my x. I'm going to circle the number that's a little bit outside of this circle, which would be this 4. And again, I'm circling this plus sign just because it's to the left of all of this. And if I draw my last circle, it'll cover up this 2 that's off on its own. Because this 2 is in the outer circle, that's the first thing I want to get rid of. How do I get rid of a 2? Well, it's not being multiplied or divided by anything, so we're going to subtract it from the left side. What we do on the left side, we do on the right side of the equal sign, so over here I'm also going to put a -2. On the left-hand side, 2 minus 2, those go away, and it leaves us with positive x over 4, which we can just write as x over 4. On the right-hand side, I need to go ahead and subtract those numbers. 22 minus 2 gives me 20. At this point, we're almost done. X is being divided by 4. So to get rid of the 4, we need to do the opposite of dividing by 4. And that would be multiplying both sides by 4. So if I multiply the left side by 4, I can also multiply the right side by 4. On the left side, these 4's cancel out, and it leaves me with an x. On the other side, we have 20 times 4, and 20 times 4 is 80. So our final answer would be x equals 80.